catch up YouTube. It's time for your weekly dose of crazy, right? Good evening, folks. Tuesday. Man, this is such a weird week. So, the usual. We're going to ramble a little bit before we get on topic. Let folks get here, all the YouTube notification nonsense, blah, 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 blah. So this is my last week at my current job, right? And it's a little weird. So one of the team leads is on vacation for the rest of the week. So today was like the last day I'm ever going to work with that guy. And we've all been running around like crazy, trying to... We had a bunch of stuff going on where we had people out of state who just came back and all this other stuff across our various teams. So, let's say we're all playing catch up, and I've been like the one main person for the last 2 weeks on the ground. So I'm kind of like dumping as much of my brain as possible into a bunch of documentation and to help my team when I'm gone, right? So, yeah, it's been wild. It's really weird because it feels like I have nowhere near enough time to do a number of things I want to get done before my last day. That's a very, very weird feeling, And I don't know if anybody's ever been in that position where like you're moving on to something new, you're very interested in that, but at the same time, like you really care about what you're leaving behind. So you're doing everything you possibly can, and you just like I don't have enough time. But yeah, basically 3 more commutes. Bob Purcell, you got it right. 3 more commutes. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are my last 3 drives in. I'll probably go see my team every couple of months or so for like lunch and just catch up with them and see how they're doing. Because I generically really care about those people. Generically is the wrong word. Generally is the right word. But like they're people that I really care about. And, I'll be kind of constantly checking in with some of them. We actually had two of the people on my team, we were trying to figure out a basically monthly way to hang out. Just because we're all pretty friendly with each other. We have some similar interests. We're trying to figure out how we can schedule something to make sure we all keep in touch and all that kind of stuff. So it's been crazy. I have a bunch of meetings all throughout the rest of the week. It's going to be very interesting. All right, so freshwater ichthyology. Why, hello. I know you. I've been watching you. Been learning way more about plecos than I ever thought on your channel. Okay. What else can we talk about? Is there anything else before I get on topic? Maybe just dive into the topic because it's interesting enough, and some people in chat have already talked about some things. So, Dusk had mentioned about, redundancy as opposed to diversity. Well, I'll cover that too, because it's kind of a combination, right? So, our topic is why reliance on one thing will result in failure. So, and why diverse systems matter. And let me explain what I mean with an example. The easiest way to think about this is how we treat our filtration, right? We've talked a little bit about filtration recently. This is not about one's better than the other. It's about how, especially in freshwater, if you look at like the aquariums of, say, when I was a kid, when we're looking at the 80s and even into the very early 90s, and you'd mostly see like one kind of filter on a tank. Whereas we look at tanks that most of us keep today, especially if you're watching my channel, you're probably keeping a planted tank. So we have a combination of whether it's a hang-on back, a canister, maybe you've got a plenum, underground filter, whatever kind of filtration you're using, in conjunction with plants that are bringing you vegetative filtration, right? So this creates a more diverse or complex system rather than having just aerobic bacteria, just anoxic bacteria, whatever it is, these combinations of things give you some safety. It's like a safety net. And let me explain why reliance on one thing can result in failure. I will give you an example that came up in conversation, I think like 2 years ago now, between Master Breeder Dean and I. That's got to be 3. Because it's when he gave me the rainbows that I temporarily housed in this tank for a while up until they passed, right? They're a dwarf rainbow. They only live so long. He had lost a ton of them. And he'd been struggling with them. And so one of the things that I was sitting there, I was like, okay, are you using your usual setup? Which, he's big on sponge filtration. Typically uses a lot of like 10 and 20 gallon tanks when he's doing his raising. Does regular water changes, all this kind of stuff, right? So normally, this should not be an issue. And the issue wasn't filtration. I want to be very clear. It's not like he wasn't doing proper filtration. But in a system like that, let us say we're doing just sponge filtration. We're using aerobic bacteria to do a majority of the conversion of our harmful chemicals into safer things. If we were to not do water changes, eventually the nitrates would build up and then they would get to levels where they're potentially toxic. So we have to do water changes. But what happens if we have a kind of a higher bioload and we're going to go on vacation and we got somebody else feeding our tanks, or maybe more food than we would normally put in there? If we're reliant on this one type of filtration, accidents can occur, or some negligence, or just, you've got a more novice person doing things. You might do more than that system could handle. And because there isn't something else in the equation helping us, like plants or like a plenum or deep sand bed, like there's lots of options here, right? We can run into one thing getting out of whack and causing a problem. This can also happen with things like algae, right? We can have huge algae outbreaks in a simpler system. But in more complex systems where we have lots of different things all working in conjunction to give us better water quality, we are a lot less likely to see things like that occur when the system is established. Now, when we're building the system at first, we don't have everything balanced out and all that kind of stuff, right? It's very easy to run into problems. So why am I saying one thing will result in failure? Unfortunately, in most cases, when it comes to live animals, especially fish, because water chemistry is just such a complicated thing, it is usually a not if, but when scenario. And the more that we bring multiple things in to help us, right, I guess you say more like safety barriers we place there to protect ourselves. And there's other ways that we can do this. So an example would be, let us say that our system, our reliance is Bentley feeds flake food. He feeds the same kind of flake 6 days a week, right? And I know how much food I'm putting in each tank. I've got a system down. Well, Bentley's got to go on vacation because he's going out to the Triple Crown event. Now, brother-in-law James is going to help out, and he's going to feed all the tanks 6 days a week. But brother-in-law James might see Bentley put in a pinch of food and go, oh, I know about how much that is. And put in what he thinks is the same amount, but it ends up being potentially double. It doesn't seem like it because it feels like so little in your fingers. But you put it in the tank and the fish are eating it, and you're like, oh, they're eating it, we're going to be fine. But over time, through that week, we start getting buildups of extra phosphates or all kinds of things. Human error is very easy to mess with stuff. Now we've got excess food that causes all sorts of problems, blah, blah, blah. If I was in a system with no plants, it becomes very easy to overload just the sponge filter or just a small hang-on back. A lot harder to mess with the hang-on back. It's got a little bit extra biocapacity, right? But still, there is a potential. Or, let's talk about something that Sunny Singh actually just mentioned in chat. Maintenance schedule. Some people clean their filters too often. Let me give you an example. Very often you'll be given advice as a beginner, don't do your water change and clean your filter on the same day. And part of the reason we're trying to prevent that is we're trying to prevent things like crashes from occurring because too much cleaning is happening at the same time and not enough established water running around. Some people will go through, and let's say you've got a just a hang-on back. You've got like an aqua clear, right? And instead of rinsing out only the sponge, they'll rinse out all the media. Or maybe worse, they're using like a Tetra Whisper, and they're using those cartridges, and they go to Petco, and Petco tells them, oh yeah, once a month you just change out all your cartridges. So they have this one filter, and they're told this one filter is going to do everything for them. You got your hot pink gravel, your SpongeBob SquarePants Pineapple Hut, and your Glowfish, right? That's your tank. That's your first tank. Oh, a month's gone by. I need to change out my filtration canisters to keep everything nice and clean. Pull out all your stuff. Now there goes your entire bacteria colony. Everything new goes in. No bacteria colony. Gone. But if you had plants, you'd still have plenty of bacteria colony on all the plants, plus the plants doing their own work. Now, yeah, the gravel's going to have its bacteria and all that kind of stuff, but I can think back in the 80s, right, when it was very common to hear stories of like, oh yeah, mom's going to clean out the goldfish bowl, and we'll take a little bit of water in the goldfish, put the goldfish in a cup, clean out, maybe even bleach. I know people that had that. Mom bleached the whole goldfish bowl to get nice and clean, cleaned out all the gravel, rinsed it off really good, put it back in there, fresh water, put the goldfish back in there. It'll be fine. There's nothing anymore. And this is a result that can give us a simple system, right? But we're completely redoing everything, and it's human error. But it leaves a very high chance for failure. Now, modern fish keeping, there's a little bit better knowledge out there. You've got dum-dums like me out here who are telling you like, hey, don't bleach your whole tank. You know, you don't need to replace all the stuff in the filter. You just need to rinse the sponge out and you'll be okay. Or every once in a while, take that, a bag of old tank water and just kind of move your media around, but don't actually rinse it. Just get all the extra gunk off of it and then put it back in there and make sure it stays wet and you'll be okay. The colony will stay alive, you'll be fine. But there's lots of ways that we can mess up things, and sometimes it's completely unintentional, right? That a complex system will kind of protect us from. Now, what is the difference between diverse and redundant? Because there's an important difference here. They can play the same role, but I think there's a bigger importance in a diverse system over a redundant system. So the big reason why we see failure is it's single point of failure, which means that if we mess up the one thing that's protecting us, we expose ourselves to big risk, right? This is in the software testing industry, this is what we call risk assessment, right? Redundant systems would be something like, I have a sponge filter and a hang on the back, or maybe I have multiple sponge filters in a tank. Maybe I've got a 40-gallon breeder and I've got a sponge on each corner, on each side of the tank. This is multiple filters, and I only ever clean one at a time, right? That's keeping things established so that we're protecting ourselves with redundancy. But there are still potentials that you can overload that singular system. Say if you're feeding way too much, or maybe you don't notice that behind your favorite set of rocks you've had a couple of fish that were your older fish pass away, or they're something that normally hides a lot, like a pleco or something, and it choked on a piece of gravel and died, or whatever the heck it may be, and now it's just this kind of ammonia bomb slowly going off, and you don't notice it. Well, we can start building up and extra ammonia, the bacteria colonies handling, but it's producing more and more nitrates. And let's say we've been real busy last couple weeks at work. We haven't been able to water change. We've only been topping our water off. Those nitrates keep rising and rising and rising. Yeah, this is human error. Human error is easy. That's the most common thing that's going to happen in aquatics is human error. We are people. We are very fallible. We make mistakes. We hopefully learn from those mistakes, but we're going to make them. A redundant system doesn't necessarily protect you from some of those mistakes. It will help in the thing of like cleaning out the filters. If you only clean out one filter at a time, you don't risk like killing all your bacterial colonies. I made a great example a while back of a member of my club who's got a discus tank with some of Dean's wild discus babies, right? So babies from Dean's wild discus. He has 3 Fluval 407s on that tank. And each week, he just walks down the line of which one he's going to service. So that he always has 2 established and okay. He every filter is serviced every 3 weeks. He's very meticulous in the way that he does things. And it's to make sure that he can't possibly have a bacterial colony crash, because 2 are always good at all times and only 1 is ever serviced per week. And he has a strict rotation, right? Very, very playing the heavy redundancy game. But you still could, in theory, without, now granted he's a big plant guy, so he's got plants too, you could, in theory, still deal with some kind of potential issue from some human error, despite that meticulous nature. A diverse system would be something like you have an anoxic plenum with a hang-on back giving you aerobic bacteria and all your usual stuff. Sponge filters plus plants, right? These are things that attack all of the potentially dangerous chemicals in our aquarium from multiple vectors. The goal is to cover the whole swath of ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. And I'm sure someone like freshwater ichthyology could tell me how I am in no way being very sciencey at all. And that's true. We want to go high level with this. We want to do simplistic thinking. There's lots of ways that you can do things that are far more intelligent scientifically than what I'm trying to explain. But I'm trying to explain this at a high level. A simple level that any of us can understand. We don't have to be an ichthyology student to understand, right? You could be just, dumb tech guy or whoever, basic aquarist versus person who's done it for 20 years and understand what I'm trying to talk about. When we attack from multiple vectors, like plants are there to handle our nitrates and this and that, and we've got a hang-on back filter that's getting rid of our ammonia, all those kind of things, those do a great job. Was it mentioned earlier? This is like 4 types of filtration on their tank. I actually want to cover this because it was an interesting comment. I need to dive up and chat here. And then, Leo, I will get to your question. Don't worry, buddy. Don't worry. We'll get to that question. Oh, no. Did I lose it? It's like just go completely off topic. Because I saw this comment, I was like, it's really great, but it doesn't apply right now. Go away, computer. Stop your notifications. Anyway, it was like, I have an aerobic sump, I have this, I have that. And it's like 4 different types of filtration, basically put, all in combination, where you have so much protection that you can do things like not do a water change every week. You could probably only top off for a few weeks and things like that. That's where I think that diverse systems are way more interesting and way more helpful. You are a lot less likely to run into problems from human error with a diverse system. Whereas a singular system, there it is, Dusk, thank you. Pretty sure I have at least 4. Auto water change, aerobic sump zone, anoxic sump zone using a plenum, and remediation through abundant plant biomass. Look at those fancy words. Remediation. Ooh. Wordsmithing today, Dusk. I like it. But these combinations of things, these diverse systems, and it's easy, right? For most of us who like keeping planted tanks, you're basically creating a diverse system from the get-go. The choice is just whether you decide to use plants and an anoxic system, plants and an aerobic system, anaerobic and an anoxic, an aerobic with a deep sand bed, plants with a deep sand bed, right? There's tons of options out there for us to create a diverse combination in filtration. Similarly, let's go the opposite route. Heaters. Let's say that you determine you need a 300 watt heater for your tank. And you have a couple of options. You could get one 300 watt heater, 2 200 watt heaters, or maybe you don't need to go that high and do a couple or 3 100 watt heaters. That way, if one dies or one kind of sticks on, you have multiple heaters all set where like one's doing most of the work, one's set a little bit lower, and you're less likely to just have no heat or too much heat from the most powerful heater in the tank. Now this is more of a redundancy thing, right? But in this case, you're not relying on a singular item inside the tank. It's a little harder to get diverse when it comes to heat in our tropical aquariums, other than like heat the room plus a small heater set to a certain thing just in case, like, let's say the way you heat your room is by running a dehumidifier and you have to manually empty that dehumidifier. Just in case you forget to empty it, you have some small heaters turned down fairly low. Like, let's say you're trying to keep your room at 78 and you got the heater set to 70, right? They're your bottom of the barrel to make sure there's just a little bit of heat so the fish are okay if you forget something occurs. Things like that are another way to approach kind of a diverse system of approaching heating your tank. The most obvious one, of course, is going to be filtration. Aeration. You could have an air stone plus plants. That creates a diverse system instead of just air stone. Because if you lose power, now you're losing air. But if you still have plants, got stuff going, right? So that's my my topic. I thought it would be a little fun to have an approach to something that isn't like, I guess it's saying like one is better, but the reason why is it protects us from our own mistakes. Because we're eventually, one of us, humble humans, is going to screw up something. I've done plenty of screwing up in my time. I'm sure you have too. We all mess up. Yeah, Paul Sotero's heater controller is another great way, like, to protect yourself from a heater going wonky on you. Using a controller in combination with things is another way to do some very, very safe redundancies. Ooh, good question. On topic. Kingfisher's Catch. What redundancy has saved you in the past? I like it. So, I had power loss at my house. There's a video about it where I lost power for 55 hours. All of my tanks that had plants, I never had to put any aeration in them or worry about weird things with the filters. Because the plants did their job, and despite not getting a lot of light, we're still doing some level of photosynthesis, consuming something, but more importantly, they still acted as a good ground for beneficial bacteria to survive on top of. And because they're doing a little bit of producing oxygen, respiring during the day, it's helping protect those fish. In the tanks where I didn't have those things, I needed to run air. Just simply put, I had to have air in those tanks. I've had heaters fail, and when I only had one heater in the tank, you guys have seen I've lost fish in the past because a heater got stuck on and it got way too hot. And had I had multiple smaller heaters, all at lower levels, so that combined they create the temperature I want, I would be more likely to not have had that problem. So I can say I've had single points of failure, and I've been bitten in the butt by them, and I've had multiple points of protection and had them save me when things outside my control said, hey, I hope you're ready for this. Welcome to power outage for 3 days. This is rough, man. Let me tell you, it was rough. But I think those are good examples. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it certainly helps. All right. We've got some great comments. I'm going to get to Leo's question just so I don't lose it real fast, but then there's a few great comments in chat that I want to talk about too. So from Leo209, first off, thanks for the $5 super chat, man. Not needed, but you're always awesome with your questions. What's your opinion on what amount of nitrates in a tank is best for plants to stay healthy and grow? I really like that somewhere between 10 and 20 parts per million range. But my goal is to keep that range at all times. I like that kind of like lean, constant dosing methodology. So that's what I'm shooting for. Do I actively test for it nowadays? Not very often. I usually know about where I need to keep my tanks in order to maintain that. And I can usually look at a tank and go, oh, I've been screwing up. I've been working too much. I forgot to fertilize. I need to get this tank back on track. But that's my goal when I used to do a lot of testing, or when I put brand new tanks together and I'm trying to figure out my balance. When I'm actively testing to figure out how to get myself into that target, that's what I'm shooting for. 10 to 20 parts per million. That's my goal. You can go as high as the 20 to 40 range, but I think 10 to 20 is just a little more optimal for what I like to do, which is kind of, like I said, a more lean fertilization method. I want just enough to where the plants have something to constantly feed on, but not too much that algae can potentially pick up on it and thrive off of it. I also don't run heavy CO2. If I was running heavier CO2, I would probably say that 20 to 40 range. So if you're doing like a heavily, super heavily stocked aquascape, high CO2 style tank, high light power, one of those very high intensity, you're like ADAs, green aqua, that kind of stuff, 20 to 40 is probably what I would target, because those plant systems just need more because they have more things available to them from the raw amount of light and the raw amount of carbon from the CO2 being injected. With low CO2 injection, which is what you guys know, I like that, as I call it, the American barbecue method, low and slow, 10 to 20 is about perfect for me. All right, got that one. Let's get a couple of cool comments on topic from chat, and then we'll slam into full-on questions. There's no high five emoji to my knowledge. Yeah. I guess you could kind of make something work, but... so Adele said, at 10 years old, I would take out a little box filter and boil it. Definitely didn't understand the concept of a cycle tank and destroyed my filter. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know that plenty of interesting things happened in my house when I was young when it came to cleaning the fish tanks on some of the ones that weren't the big tanks. And somehow, man, the fish just always made it. It's like the fish were invincible back in the day, or just that's what I tell myself, and I don't remember all the bad. Freshwater Ichthyology said, my mom tried cleaning the tank that way with guppies and dropped the tank. We had to get a new tank and then did proper water changes. So by taking it and emptying the entire thing out. Oh, no. Oh, no. MNC Aquatics, I've been experimenting running a tank with no filtration or air for 3 weeks now. It's been set up for 3 years, lots of plants and fairly deep substrate. So yeah, so you're basically kind of combining anaerobic with vegetative, right? The vegetative is acting as our oxygen source, right? As those plants respire, when they're doing their photosynthesis, they're creating oxygen inside of our tank. Then you've got things to help handle the stuff in there with the deep sand bed and all that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily have to actively aerate tanks. It just helps. It doesn't hurt you is really what it comes down to. But it's good to hear that you've had that going so well for so long, MNC. I'd be really curious to see a picture of that tank, just so I can see what it looks like and how big it is. Like, are we talking 20 gallons, 40 gallons, 100 gallons, 10 gallons? I'd be very curious. I love digging into those kind of things. They interest me a lot. Oh, All right. Alyssa talking to me about how I've been peeking at her tanks or something. 3 kinds of filters plus plants and substrate. Hey, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I'm gonna be very. I have some interesting ideas for whenever I can get to doing my garage. I'm trying to decide which path I want to take. I have ideas that are either psycho or genius, and I'm not sure which one they are. Bob Purcell, any update on the Master Aquatic Horticulturist program? Yes and no. So, yes, in that I'm trying to lock down a dev right now. No, in the sense that I've basically put that on hold while I'm brain dumping all of my information to my old job and preparing for the start of the new job. Trying my real goal is, like, if I can stand everything up, which I'll be more aggressively doing things here very shortly. I want to try and get it stood up before summer is over. But if I pin myself down too much, I'm just going to, probably piss myself off when I get too focused on something. But, yeah, basically I'm going to... One of the nice things of the new job is that I have a better budget for making this thing happen than I did last time. So it's a little easier to spend more money and get faster results when I can find the person that I have the most faith in. I started talking to a few devs, and then it was like, okay, now I need to go into a rabbit hole for 2 weeks and prep for my interview for my potential new job. Landed new job. Now I need to get my old job prepared for what's going to happen in transitioning when I'm gone. Putting my work life before my fun stuff. I know. I'm trying, guys. I promise. I really want to get it out there because I want you guys to be able to participate in that. It's intended to be my gift to the hobby. Hopefully, I can stop slacking. Oh, speaking of random stuff, we will officially have Ye merch, and let me explain what we're doing. So, I'm gonna do a combination of things. I'm gonna build some custom stickers that'll go out, but if you are going to the Triple Crown event and you're a member or Patreon, one of the two, I'm gonna build custom hats. Okay, now here's the thing. You guys know I love to wear hats. They're going to be based on this art that's one of the membership badges, right? We're going to a convention that's about rainbow fish, in part. Of course, I'm going to put a rainbow fish on there. Now, the embroidery can't do, this nice fade transition here, but it's based on this art. And then here's the kicker. After I get them built, I'm then taking those, which that order goes in tonight. So I've been talking back and forth with a custom hat maker that does custom embroidery, trying to narrow down what I can and can't do through them. And then I have a friend who can do some embroidery work, but can't do that fish logo on the hat, right? That's too complex for the machine they have. What I can do, and I should be able to get done, as long as there's not some weird delays from the initial creator of the hats, is every hat will be individually numbered. So you will know that you have hat number 5. or hat number 6. And I'm only making a certain number of them. However many I have left over, okay, for people who are unable to go to the Triple Crown event, I'm going to do some just member-specific giveaways, and I'm just going to ship them to you. So, keep that in mind. When I get the first, like, prototype, you guys will see it. Fun stuff. And then for non-members, like, there'll be a sticker that's based off of this. It'll have some stuff that makes it limited, where it's specific to that. So, you know, there'll be stuff for free. And then if you're a member, my extra way of saying thanks will be a hat. Don't have to wear it, not required, but it's something you can enjoy. All right, it is back on the topic, which is to say it's question time. Again, the usual at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see stuff. Let's see here. So I've been seeing aquatics, and my filterless tank is a 35-gallon hex. Ooh, are you a hex tank hex tank apologist? Oh man, so used to be a person that actively watched Corvus Austin's channel. I always thought he had the funniest name. Sunny saying, no, we're apex predators that don't mess up. If only humans didn't screw up constantly. Nur, is it recommended to 100% light at 6 hours or 70% light at 8 hours? 100% dependent on the type of plants you have. So if you have a lot of low light plants, you're better off doing 70% light for 8 hours. If you have a lot of like stems or high demand plants, you're better off having that 6 hours of 100% light. So adjust your lighting based on the plants you're keeping. There's no simple rule for every tank. It has everything to do with the demands inside your tank. Mike Standby, I've been messing with decapsulated brine. You think it does as good a job as live brine? No. It does a good job. The difference is the fresher the hatches of live baby brine, the more nutrient rich it is. Decapsulated brine just isn't going to get there. Similarly. Plus, live brine is still going to move in the water, and that triggers a natural instinct in your fish, where decapsulated brine is just going to move with the flow as opposed to move like a live being will do. And there's little things in your fish's like natural instincts that make it more attractive to go after the live. To be fair, I've never had issues with decapsulated brine. I've used it before. I like it, especially if you don't have time to deal with live brine. That's actually the other thing that, like, it's sad to say that one of the things I'm most excited about with my new job and working from home is that I'll have time to start doing live brine again. I'll have time to actively be maintaining live brine cultures regularly. So, such a dumb fish nerd thing to be excited about, right? Bob Purcell, in what areas do you think diversity is unnecessary? I don't see many advantages to diversity in lighting, for example. Light goes out, wait a couple days, replace it likely. Yeah, I would say that where diversity is less necessary, lighting's probably the best example. You also could argue that, like, you don't need diversity in substrate in a planet tank. You could do just like Fluval Stratum or just Echo Complete. You could even do just hot paint gravel if you've got the right plants and the right fertilization going on. It's not as great as some of the other things, but you don't have to have dirt and aqua soil, right? One or the other will do fine. So there's a few things where this happens. Most of it comes down to realistically, the big one is filtration. And then the secondary one's probably heat, just to play a safety net. But beyond that, not really a lot of need. Not really a lot of need. Johnny at Dan's Fish. Johnny, good to see you, buddy. My mom cleaned houses, and one house had a goldfish aquarium. Every week, she would take the goldfish out, drain it, scrub it with who knows what, then fill it up with a hose, even in the Alaskan winter. If those goldfishes went through that, man, they are the toughest goldfish on planet Earth. It's so funny. I can remember as a kid, one of the last fish I had for a while we were doing a bunch of big changes at my house, we had our big 125-gallon tank out in my garage instead of my house. So no heat in this thing at all. So in the winter it would get stupid cold because the garage was only partially insulated. It wasn't fully insulated, so it didn't hold heat all that well, and we didn't have a heater running in there at all times. It was only somebody who was actively in there did we run the heating unit that was in that particular garage. We had a goldfish that I'd won at a stupid state fair. You know, the atypical, like, win a fish in a bowl, it's going to either die or be unkillable. I had the unkillable goldfish. I remember that we only had about this much water in that tank, and it was solid green. It was more green than my shirt, right? That thing was almost impossible to see through. And that goldfish, fine. Go out there and, like, give him a little bit of food. You'd forget to feed him for, like, 3 days. Didn't care. Goldfish was fine. Happy, healthy. Did just fine. Eventually, my aunt, who was the African cichlid keeper that I told you about, she was getting that tank from us so that she could put her frontosa in that big tank, because that was her baby. And she was going to take the goldfish and put him in his own tank and give him a decent-sized tank. They had one non-African cichlid tank. Goldfish goes in there, immaculate water, within a year passed away. Had been living in that, like, green water mess where it was like, oh, the water's kind of low, go get the garden hose, pour it in, don't even worry about the chlorinator. Right? Just complete negligence. Goldfish live through everything. Goes into a robust system. My aunt was very meticulous, cared so much about all her fish. They were her babies. Goldfish doesn't even last a year. To be fair, it was kind of old for a, like, you got it at a fair goldfish. I think that fish was like 5 or 6 years old at that point. But it was just like, what does that figure? You take it at, like, horrible conditions. And, like, yeah, I'm kind of revealing deep down, like, when I was, I think it was 13 at the time or whatever, just, like, not taking the right care of that one fish. It's funny, man. Goldfish, sometimes they're just, like, these unstoppable tanks, and at other times they're just, like, the fragilest thing on earth. It's so wild to me to think about that. It used to be like that with, guppies too, man. Guppies used to be so tough. Now they're such fragile babies. Kingfisher's Catch. I've heard newly hatched brine shrimp are more nutritious than older brine. I need help understanding where the nutrients go. Yeah, so the fresher the hatch when it comes to brine are a lot like a lot of our fish, where they actually have a very microscopic yolk sac within the first, I think it's like 6 hours of their hatching. So basically what you're getting is they're so fresh they still have that yolk sac, and you're getting all of that extra nutrition from the yolk sac to your fish. But basically after, I think it's 12 hours tops, they've consumed that yolk sac, and you no longer have all that additional, like, fresh nutrition there, because it's consumed to help them grow and build out their carapace and all those things. Does that make sense? That's why, like, live baby brine that's as close to the fresh hatch as you can get is, like, the most optimal food out there. Freshwater Ichthyology, the other member of Team Bentley. One question for lighting. I wonder about the benefits, potentially, of UVB bulbs, like for reptiles, but how do we measure beneficial to dangerous levels with so many variables? You're the ichthyology student. Shouldn't you know this? So, the sad part is, outside of finding someone who's done some level of scientific study on that, I don't know that there's an easy way to figure out how much UVB is good versus bad when it comes to fish. And potentially you could also say submerged plants life, right? Because realistically it's going to be algae that's going to take care of that UVB, because the UV starts getting out of the spectrum where the plants care. But we're talking mostly about the fish, right? It's tough. I don't know that there's a reasonable study out there. I would have to ask a couple people that are far more science-minded than I am when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I'd have to ask them if they've ever looked into that. Because I'm sure one of like the three people I'm thinking of, and two of which were like, you know, either one's a marine biologist, one's a fisheries biologist, here in Washington. They're going to know a lot more than I do, because they are actually like educated in those things. I'm just some dumb who's learned by making lots of mistakes. But I don't know that there's been any reasonable study on that. There has to be, right? You would think there would have to be, because we figured out about reptiles. We got to figure out about fish that come from like major high amounts of sunlight, tropical areas, as compared to like river fish or things like bass that hide all the time, stuff like that, right? We think so. Asking me tough questions that I'm nowhere ready to answer properly. Mitch, what 5 plants would you recommend growing for profit? Strong. Gotta go back to the roots here. So, my suggestion in general about growing plants for profit would be these. Either red tiger lotus or dwarf aquarium lily. I would lean toward red tiger lotus because it's easier to propagate faster. Once you figure out the right balance of how to get that plant really kicking off fast, it's easier and faster to propagate red tiger lotus. Pokestamon octopus because it grows like a weed and it's very popular and it's very easy. Ludwigia repens because it's an easy plant to get red without needing CO2. Alternanthera reinekii because it's a great red plant that with CO2 is very beautiful and very distinct. So, it's 4, right? Number 5, this one might shock you. Dwarf water lettuce. Floating plant. Let me explain why. You will find a lot of people who keep koi or goldfish that are willing to buy dwarf water lettuce to feed to their fish, because it's extremely healthy for those fish. It grows so fast you can sell it very quickly. I wouldn't say famously, but I've said many times that the way that I used to sell plants when I first started doing plants for profit is I only advertised dwarf water lettuce for sale on Craigslist and OfferUp. Then people would come in, and as I was getting dwarf water lettuce out of my tank, they would see all the other plants in my display room, because I had several tanks. And they would see all these beautiful plants and go, oh, what is that plant? What is that plant? And you just go, oh, that's this. It's actually super easy, blah, blah, blah. I sell that one too. Do you want some of it? And just add on, right? It's like impulse buying when you're at the grocery store or whatever. They have all the stupid candy and gum and all the snacks and the trashy magazines and all that nonsense, right? Your National Enquirer and all that garbage gossip nonsense. They're all right there at the register because it's an impulse buy. You're like, oh yeah, I want one of those, or that looks good. Yeah, I want to treat myself. I had a bad day at work. I'm gonna get a candy bar or whatever the heck your pleasure is, right? A bag of chips or whatever it may be. It's like an impulse buy. That was my strategy for like the first, I think, 6 months. And I started getting a lot of extra photos so that I could show more plants. And I was really kicking into gear because I built tanks specifically for plants for profit at that point. Dwarf water lettuce for a while, that was my hook. That made me a stupid amount of money for something that cost me like $1 to buy my first like 5 little things of it. And then it just grows so fast. And I would constantly sell a handful of it for $5. And you pull out like 2 handfuls. You tell them a handful, you pull out like 2, give them lots for $5. And inevitably you'd have the people who like you never saw again, and you'd have some people who come back. I used to have a lady, she would come back to me every month. And she'd buy dwarf water lettuce to feed her koi, and then other plants to put in some of her other tanks in her house with some of her other fish. Worked like a charm. I saw that lady constantly. for like a year and a half. I would see her at least once every 2 months, if not every month. And she'd be picking something up. But that's what I'd go with. You got 2 easy stems. You got your tiger lotus, because that's just a really good red plant. Very simple. You get your floating plant. Did I only get 4? Did I miss my 5th? My 5th from there would be a pygmy chainsword. That gives you an easy carpeting plant. That also propagates like crazy. Not dwarf sagittaria, not any of the vowels, pygmy chainsword. So, Holanthium tenellum. The one that stays short. There you go. That's my 5. All easy. Easy plants are much easier to sell. And then when you start going past that, that's when you start adding in a little bit of more medium or higher difficulty plants for the fancy people in life who want to try something a little more fun. Sunny, how do you feel about putting different biomedias in a filter, like bio balls and ceramic rings? You know, over time, I've come to just find that I stick to one media or another depending on what filter I'm doing. So I love Brightwater's S-Series. I love that stuff. Pretty soon, I'm supposed to be receiving a thing of the new Fluval BioFX, their new ceramic media, to do some test work on. But, you know, even just like your cheapo ceramic ring is super, super effective. There's other medias that I like just because they're not as dusty, don't break down quite as easily. And that's like where I like the Brightwater a lot. I'm hoping the Fluval is going to be fairly similar. There's also I can't remember what they call them, but the little like ball media that Eheim uses. I love that stuff. As long as you keep a mesh bag on it. Because they normally don't come in a bag of any form. They're just like loose in their things. That can be kind of a nightmare to service. But if it's in a bag where it makes it easier to service, it's such a great media. It's super, super useful. It's kind of my go-tos. I know there's lots of people who love BioHome. I haven't tested it personally, but I've seen enough stuff. It's obviously a good media. I just don't know if it holds up to its denitrification claims. I haven't been able to test it to see for certain in my own hands, like whether or not I believe that part, but I'm sure it's a good media. There's lots of good media out there. That's the nice part. It's very hard to find a bad media. Most media is good for one reason or another. Just some are better than others, and you usually pay for it. Just like everybody loves their C-Chem matrix, right? Your nicer pumice, basically. Okay, Leo209, we got another question. Stocking ideas for a Fluval spec lower pH tank and plant-wise. 2 super chats because you always help. P.S. Rico stand for president. I don't know if I want Rico for president, man. That sounds dangerous. So the spec's what, like 7 gallons? It's a smaller tank. You want to go low pH? You know what I would do? My question is whether or not you're going to try and do black water. So first off, for plant-wise, I would go very simple. Actually, I'd be very, very similar to what I suggested as far as those 5 plants. Is like I would find something like your dwarf aquarium lily, probably specifically dwarf aquarium lily, and some crypts or some java fern. Nice and easy, real low maintenance plants, nothing too crazy. Stocking, I would look at either emerald or chili raspberries. Nice small fish so I can get a slightly higher number of them. They do good in slightly lower pH. Or you could look at, your cardinal tetras, things like that. Tetras that don't get super big but have good color. That'd be kind of my go-tos. I think that's where I would sit. Let me catch up on chat because I know I'm getting behind. Brandon, apparently I have 1 stem of Ludwigia white left. All the other stems melted. This last one doesn't have roots yet. Any tips to get it back? Immersed setup with Fluval stratum. Oh, man. So Ludwigia white is a fairly tough plant. The big thing is making sure it's getting very, very strong light. It is a high light demand plant. And I think about the only other thing that I've noticed is making sure that it has a reasonable amount of humidity. Every time I've seen it done well, whether it was an immersed or like a living wall set up above a tank, it was kept fairly humid. And only when it wasn't kept fairly humid did it really struggle. But you're talking about a lot of the really out there Ludwigias, like Ludwigia White, Ludwigia Tornado, those are extremely finicky plants, and they really need good CO2. Now, granted, you should be getting atmospheric CO2, so it should be helping you, but can be tough. One of the other things that you could look at, trying to make it slightly easier, is giving it something like sphagnum moss to help hold it in place, as opposed to being sunk down into media in your immersed setup, so that the moss will stay moist and humid to give your moisture to the base of the plant and hopefully help encourage root growth so that it grabs on. It's kind of weird, but it's how I've seen it done really well in like a living wall setup. And it's one of the few times I've seen it very, very, very successfully. That plant's a real kick, man. It's tough. It's real tough. Got some interesting conversation happening in chat. You folks are having too much fun. We're getting close to the end here. Oh, this is a great one. Sandy Cheeks. Is Taiwan Lily a good plants for profit plant? Yes. So I used to sell quite a lot of the Taiwan Lily, actually. And part of the reason why is because it's a very easy plant. It's easier than a lot of things, and it looks unique, right? I would always suggest it for people who had bettas. Because bettas, when it comes to any of those kind of lily plants, it gives them a nice like hammock to lay on. And when you see a betta lay in those plants, you get a totally different appreciation for those plants, because you get to see your fish just kind of chilling and relaxing in the plant, just cupped there, like a little fishy hammock, right? And those things are great because they're naturally slightly curved up instead of big flat. They actually make really, really good things for your bettas to rest in and relax. So that's how I would always like pitch selling that plant. Always did great. Plus, it's super easy. It's the easiest of all the lily and nymphaeas types, right? It's so easy to keep. And the green in it too is a little different than a lot of the other greens. It's a much more like almost like neon green color naturally, as opposed to our kind of, deeper greens like you get over here with your crypts and stuff, right? It's very bright and vibrant. Bob Purcell, what is the plant you are proudest to have been successful with? I think that's changed over time. So at first, the plant that I was most proud of my success with was red tiger lotus, because I had propagated so much of it from basically a single bulb. And I had about a third of my big display tank was just tons and tons of red tiger lotus, and it looked amazing. Now, over time, as I became a bigger plant snob, that changed. I would say right now, my proudest plant is just the level of success I've had with Crypt Jacobsoni Pink. Like, I've just had so much of that propagate for me, and it's such a pretty plant, and it's very hard to find, that I've been able to distribute it in a couple of different events in mass to get lots of people access to that plant. And that's something, I feel very good about, because for a while it was very hard to find or sold out, and I gave tons of it away. or sold it very, very cheap. And I've had lots of people come back and be like, "Oh man, I love Jacobs and I Pink. I'm so glad I got that from you. It's way better than, you're right, it's better than, Pink Flamingo." Or, "I don't know, I had trouble with Pink Flamingo, but I don't have trouble with this, and I'm happy because it's pink." That's one of the things that I feel really great about. I think the only other plant that, like, I would say I get the most compliments or questions about that I've done very successfully with is Java Fern. Because you'll see several of my tanks just have these huge masses of Java Fern in them, right? And I've grown tons and tons of Java Fern. And for one reason or another, Java Fern is one of those plants that it's surprisingly easy to struggle with. Because it's seen as a very easy plant, but it's very easy to make the simple mistakes that make it difficult with that plant. So I think from the perspective of what I get the most compliments on that also makes me very proud is typically Java Fern. A lot of people just love my tanks that have tons of Java Fern in them. And I love them too because they look amazing. It's one of those things where, like, I have a club auction coming up this Saturday, which, by the way, if you're in the Seattle area, the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society has an auction this Saturday. There'll be tons of steals and deals there. I'm going to be there hanging out. I know specifically that one of the channel members, the one who donated the aquarium co-op pump for me to pull apart, is going to be there. We're going to hang out and just babble all day and talk fish and what's a good deal and what's not. And, like, I think the only thing I'm taking to sell is a bunch of Java Fern because I just have so much of it. And I haven't been as active, like, propagating a lot of my other plants right now. I guess that's the weird way I look at that question. I like that question. That's great. Yeah, man. Java Fern grows like weeds in my tanks. It's such a good feeling, though, because it just looks so amazing. Like, huge swaths of Java Fern look incredible, no matter what kind of Java Fern it is. And Connor, to answer your question, we're getting close to the end here, but I'll answer that, and then I got a couple other short questions I want to answer too. It's kind of a potassium hog, so it needs a reasonable amount of potassium. It doesn't like super bright light. It's an epiphyte, so in general, it's from more river systems, so it generally actually appreciates a more well-oxygenated system and a little bit of flow. Kind of simple. You don't need super intense light. It likes light for a longer period of time, so like 10 hours light is great. Less power, more time. Have that constant lean fertilization method, that between 10 and 20 parts per million nitrate, and make sure that it has potassium because it's a potassium hog. Some people really struggle with it. I know that longtime viewer, longtime member Ginger Graves, she struggles with that plant a lot. She keeps trying. She's not really found success with it. And she can grow tons of plants well. And then there's, like, people like me and Paul where it's like, I don't think I can possibly screw it up unless I never have the lights on my tank. And I just abuse it on purpose. And then it creates a bunch of baby plants, and it's fine. It's like, it's like one of those things. It's so weird. So some places it just does amazing, and other places it's like the hardest plant in the world to keep happy. Mark Robinson, hello from Kingston, Jamaica. Thank you, man. Thank you for checking in. Appreciate the compliment. It's so wild and humbling when, like, I get somebody who's like, "Oh yeah, I'm from here and I'm from there," or like greetings from, Egypt and stuff like that. Like, I've seen in just the last month, really, people all over the world that, like, randomly are watching my crazy butt on YouTube. It's a very humbling thing to think about, the power of social media when it comes to our ability of, like, hobbyists all over the world can get together and just babble about plants and fish. It's cool and humbling all at the same time. Lady Diane, is it okay to feed exclusively baby brine shrimp fresh hatched? Yep. There are a lot of breeders who basically exclusively feed baby brine for a long period of time on their fish. It does amazing stuff. Bob Purcell, they want free Prime. Man, not even Amazon employees get free Prime. You're still paying for that stuff as an employee. It's such value. I can't help it. I pay for Prime. Get to watch TV stuff and get my shipping included and all that nonsense. Well, I try to, like, when it comes to fish stuff, I try really hard to buy mostly from small business. But there's some things that just, like, either I can't get from my local fish stores, or is sold exclusively through Amazon because of that's how the distributors that have those products do them. So that's when it gets a little tough. I'm gonna do one last question, and then we will bounce for the evening because I gotta go do some dinner and those things. I'm gonna go hunt for a moment because I actually caught up for chat with one. Omar, thank you, man. I really hope that at some point I get to come out and see your shop. I really do. Like, just from the short chat we had about your story, that just seems so interesting to be able to, like, sit down, see the shop that you've taken over and are now in full caretaker mode, and have a nice chat about what it's like in that kind of transition and what it's been like going from employee to owner. You know, because it's kind of similar to what Corey did, right? Like, Corey worked at a fish store for years before he ever opened his own shop, so he had to learn the ropes. Uh-oh. Talk about cable management. I better walk away from that conversation. Man, I might have covered questions so good that I can't find quickly one that I missed. Oh, okay, here we go. So, question about, I think this was in Omar, you were specifically mentioning this, and I think you're talking about the UVB, whether it would affect the fish's, or the plant growth versus fish's color. That's a great question. So, I would imagine, oh, yeah, we got to talk about the hat. Okay, we can do that. This is, and then I'll answer that question. That'll be our last one for the night. This is the Akron Rubber Ducks. So you can kind of see, I'll take this bad boy off, that in the back here is like tire track, right? Because there's a lot of tire manufacturer in Akron, Ohio. And they're specifically sponsored by, I don't think it's not Michelin, I think it's like Goodyear. One of the American tire manufacturers. But yeah, the Akron Rubber Ducks. I just love the logo. It's this like angry duck face with like the big tire streak, and I love it. They're great. All right, so I think you would be more likely with the UVB to have effect on the fish's color because you're getting into some natural sunlight tones, right? Where you're getting that spectrum. If you look at like rainbow fish, if you get them near a window where they're getting some natural sunlight a day, the spectrum of color you see that naturally shines across their scales is way different than just a standard aquarium light. And it's almost magical to watch. And then you understand truly why they're called rainbow fish when you see that. Like, I had a group of Praecox rainbows way back. And I had this like indirect sunlight coming through at a certain time of day during the summer, and I would watch this group of like 7 swim back and forth, and they would come into the sunlight, and you'd just see this beautiful rainbow sheen over that powdery blue body on both the males and the females, and it was just like, wow. I appreciate that fish way more than I ever thought I would, because now when I see natural sunlight hit their scales, their coloration just changes completely compared to what it was like under the standard aquarium light. And that's even with like a Fluval 3.0 that was on there, right? And you would see that, and I would just sit. I remember there was a period of time in the summer, back when I was in my unemployed days, and I'd just sit on my couch for like 45 minutes, just watching them swim back and forth in a group while they were in quarantine, and watch them go in and out of the sunlight, and watch how their color changed. And it was like magic, dude. So there's got to be something that if we were giving them their little broader spectrum, a little bit of that UVB, that probably would affect color in a lot of our fish, just because they're exposed to natural sunlight in nature, right? Now, as far as plants, if I recall correctly, UVB should be putting you outside of PAR, which is the photosynthetically active radiation. That's the part of the spectrum that plants actually care about. And at that point, you probably wouldn't see any difference in the plants. But I'd still be interested to see what would happen. We get some Darkwing Duck references going on. Oh, man. Anyway, gang, thank you so much. If you're in the Seattle area, check out the GSAS auction this Saturday. If you go to gsas.org, that'll give you all the details, where to go. It's in White Center, which is near where I live, actually, in the grand scheme of things. It's in the south part of the Seattle, just south of Seattle, and Renton, Tuckwell, all that kind of stuff. But lots of good deals will be there. Lots of awesome plants. Lots of fish nerds. It's always a fun time. I love our club auctions. I hope I get to see you there. If you happen to show up, come say hi. Just find me. Don't be afraid. Say hi. We'll talk fish. Do some stuff. I'll try and find you a good deal. It'll be great. If you're going to the Triple Crown, be looking forward. When I get the first prototype, we'll show it off on stream of some sweet things that we're doing. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. Sunlight, it's good, especially with rainbow fish. It's good.